Vice Chair. President, Director Vbrsp, President. My understanding is Director McCollum will be absent today. Dr. John McCullough is here, Dustin Parson. Director Matt Wallace is here in person. Director Jeff Wall is here in person. And our board liaison supervisor, Vance McKeel, is here in person.
No one wants to say something. I'm teasing you.
Yeah, the forum, Director Long and participating remotely, subject to being participating remotely, needs Vice Chair Ray, the presiding officer. Let's move to item number 2. Well, we have a forum, so we can see physically present. Vice Chair Ray has moved towards item number 2, which is adoption of remote participation and all virtual meeting policy. That resolution was in the board's packet. This has been in formulation for several months. It was delayed to allow for supervisors to adopt some their policy and also model policy. What's being presented to you today are actually 3 policies, and they're required. They're required by the Virginia General Assembly in order for this body to allow other members to participate remotely for personal reasons and also for medical reasons. The second policy is, again, it's separate. It allows this body under limited circumstances to agree to meet all virtually. So this body can adopt the 2 policies as a whole. They can adopt one policy and not the other. But certainly, it's my recommendation as the resolution is drafted to adopt these policies. Once adopted, it's my understanding Director Don Long has communicated with the Vice Chair that he wishes to participate remotely for a medical reason. And so once we adopt that policy, then Director Ray would have to put Director Long's remote participation up for votes. So I guess at this point in time, what I would do is I'd be prepared to answer the questions that directors might have as to the resolution and the policy addressed therein. There are some highlighted. Those are some highlighted sections of it, and that's just to kind of highlight some customization in terms of the policies to make them flexible. And those could be accepted or not accepted. They're subject to this body's amendment.
Okay. That's a nice introduction. Has anybody got any comments that we'll make on the policy? I've got to apologize. I've had cataracts surgery in one eye and not the other eye. So we're in reading last week, but I don't need it this eye. And this eye's so fuzzy, I can't see anything. But
My only comment is just, I think the more flexible, the more the chairs to decide in some special circumstances, the better, because we're bound with limits that we have to do that. Either, so the more happens with the chair has to make decisions in election.
I'm here with that. Thank you. Anybody else? Not. Old roll.
Yeah, and so the motion would be, I move that we need to adopt this resolution as written policy authorizing remote electronic participation in all virtual meetings. So if someone would like to make that motion.
So I'll make that motion. If I like second.
Second.
Okay. I get to call a roll. We've got this in fact.
You can go ahead and do it, and I'll keep it going. Keep it how it's only those present.
Director Long cannot vote.
No, sir.
I'll vote yes. Director Freed,
Yes.
Director McNaughton,
He's absent.
Director McCullough,
Yes.
Director Walsh,
Yes.
and Director Morrow.
Yes.
Okay. We've got 5 votes in favor, so the theory that is adopted. Thank you, everybody.
So Director Ray, the next matter would be for this body to consider Director Long's remote participation for medical reasons.
Okay.
And
Does that require a vote?
it requires a vote. It does not require an explanation beyond him tendering that he has medical reason to be absent. And the minutes do not have cannot reflect the reason for it.
Okay. I'll open that up for discussion. If anybody wants to discuss that. So I'll entertain the motion.
Motions to allow Director Long to participate in medical reason.
Well stated.
I would allow Director Long participation.
We have a motion, we have a second. Do I need a roll call vote?
Not.
All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. All done. Welcome, Mr. Long.
Director, if I can interject, audio is a little bit muffled, if we could all speak towards the ceiling, just to make sure. Speak towards. Down there, not up there.
I think I was approved to join this meeting, but I can't really hear very well, so.
You're coming in loud and clear.
Okay, matters for the public. Is anybody signed up to speak?
There's no one to sign.
That should be good.
Moving on. Approval of
Yeah.
minutes of August 16th, 2022.
Right there, thank you. Let me go with the minutes.
All right. You got a second?
Second.
All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Go ahead.
Minutes are approved. Financial report for the period ended June 30th, 2022. Director Shreve, are you going to?
Yes, a report that for the period ending 6/30/22, year-to-date operating net revenues are in red for the first time, but that reflects large contributions to other entities for which we receive pass-through funding as well. Operating revenues to date this year, $155,316.47. Operating expenditures, $624,134.32, leaving net revenues, operating net revenues of negative $468,817.85, offset by pass-through funding in excess of $600,000, $616,037.22. Smaller pass-through expenditures of $23,650, leaving a net pass-through of $592,722. Net revenues, therefore, for the year thus far, $123,569.37, leaving us with the cash and cash equivalent balance of $976,469.94 as of June 30th. Any questions about that? The big outlay there was the $300,000 for habitat.
I have just one question generally, I'm still getting up to speed. What is the source of the funds that are available, I mean, excluding grants and things from other institutions? What's the pot that the board has to work with?
Well, excluding the grants, most of which come through the pass-through funding category, we earn interest on our balance. We receive fees for authorizing bond issuance, and that's pretty much it.
I think there's some greater context as well, because I'm not sure they're come up with the history of funding here.
The board has had year-end funds left over and then allocated those funds to what's known as an economic development investment fund. So it's one-time funding, it's not a recurring amount. That money is what Director Shree was talking to us past 3 months. That means we use the economic development funding to pay the EDA, and the EDA that handles the transaction with that private sector. So there's also, in addition to the bonds, there's also that funding that the board has allocated. I guess within 3 years ago. So there's sort of a pool of undesignated funds out there for this type of projects.
And how much in a given year, what would be the amount?
We have a goal of having $5 million available for that amount of funds. We don't currently have that amount. You know, off the top, be able to look that up. We've got a spreadsheet where we track the exact amount of funding. One of the things I'll say is that the number sounds much greater than it is because a lot of that money's already been earmarked for projects. And I'll just give you one example of that 5 million that was originally included in the fund. 1.6 million of that is going to the Barnes Lumber project in downtown Crozet, which is building a public plaza, putting in some road infrastructure, and it's part of that particular public-private partnership. We'll give you an exact number of balance. The current balance is that $1.5 million is what we bought for. And the total amount carried forward is 3.624 million. But of that, all of that money is earmarked for projects. So we don't have funding available necessarily for new projects unless we make decisions to push off to the later projects. And I'll be happy to sit down with you and walk through all of those in the second time.
Thank you, sir. Minority business grant. It's the United Way person.
Yes, Mr. Chair, we're going to promote Ravi Respeto, the representative for the United Way, as a panelist, and she'll be presenting virtually.
While Mr. Newberry provides promotion, I provide a little context. There is objective data that shows minority businesses have less access to capital.
I would use this one because then it will be
Bill Gates through their playbook on what local governments can do to promote minority businesses. It's actually called the Gates Fund. I'm happy to share that later on, but it was a recognition in our community that what was true generally for the public is also true in our community. So we have been working in concert, we and the economic development staff have been working in concert with the city of Charlottesville and the United Way on methodologies that we can address that funding gap for those small startup businesses. We have reached a general understanding of how the Economic Development Office, our funding that passes through the EDA, could help overcome that particular need in our community. Today, you're going to hear from the president and CEO of the CEO United Way of Greater Charlottesville, Ravi, who's going to talk to you a little bit about what that particular project looks like. It is our hope today that you will receive this information, and if you agree with it in principle, we'll come back with a more finalized product and a resolution to move this from a conceptual idea into an actual grant program, which we can then enact in concert with the United Way and the city of Charlottesville. So that being said, I'll turn it over to you, Robbie, for your presentation.
Yep, thank you so much, Roger. First off, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay, so I should have a PowerPoint, and I'm not sure if you can see it there in the room, but I'm not seeing it quite yet on my screen. Wonderful. Great. So what I wanted to start with is just kind of walking through a little bit about how United Way arrived at being involved in the grant process to small minority-owned businesses in the community by way of our initiative called Envision, which as you see is a new narrative for our community. So really focusing on how we resource our community differently than we've done historically by understanding kind of what are the challenges faced for minorities, in particular Black and Brown owned businesses. and a little bit about the history of what families have faced here in our community. So if you want to go to the next slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about the greater context, and then we'll kind of get into what we're thinking in terms of what a partnership might look like with the county and also with the city. So about 3 years ago, the United Way started working on a strategic plan to have some very specific priorities where we could make a significant difference in our community. And so we came up with 3 really distinct goals. The first one is to help lift 1,800 families out of poverty in our city and our county and our planning district, specifically 630 Black families, being very conscious of the fact that Black families suffer from disparities around income, access to capital, housing, things of those nature relative to their white counterparts. And also looking at education as a huge component of shifting generational poverty. So we also have a goal of increasing by 10% kindergartners who come from economically disadvantaged households and passing what we call developmental benchmarks. And lastly, creating a connected community through education and outreach around sort of the systems and the histories that created systemic poverty here in our community. If you want to go to the next slide. We've looked at a lot of the data, and really one of the challenges that we face in our community is that our very low income families struggle to get ahead. You can see from the graphic that we have families making about $35,000 a year. About 12,000 individuals are in that situation. And if you look at kind of the percentage breakdown, who's most impacted, you can see 35% of those are represented by Black families. One of the things United Way always sees on a regular basis is the cost of housing, if combined with childcare and just basics like transportation, leave families in a position where they have very little income left over for any other kind of living expenses. And so a lot of our efforts have been really focused on how do we create interventions that support families in being able to overcome those types of challenges economically, which will lead us to this discussion today around a possible grant partnership. Next slide. So we realized United Way alone can't tackle a problem as big as sort of poverty that's been intractable in our community for many years. And so we have been working with 9 different partner organizations, nonprofits that are also doing this type of work to come up with a coordinated service delivery model where that we could approach the issues and interventions collectively and together. This is called the Financial Resiliency Task Force. We started meeting 3 years ago. And if you'll go to the next slide, I'll show you some of the organizations that are involved in this effort. So many of them are names that you'll be familiar with, but particularly CIC, which I know the county has done a lot of work with already around loans for entrepreneurs and small businesses, Habitat for Humanity in terms of housing and housing opportunities, Piedmont Housing Alliance, New Hill Development, Network to Work for Jobs and Job Skill and Training, MACA in terms of early education opportunities. So many of the organizations that you see here have been doing great work for many years in our community, but we understood together we would be able to make a much bigger impact, and we'd be able to be much more efficient in our practices. So our goal is to launch a data referral network system that includes the organizations you see there that will help a family essentially get ahead based on what their individual needs are. And small minority-owned businesses are one of the target populations that we intend to support and to help get ahead. If you go to the next slide. So we currently have a partnership on the Minority Business Alliance through the Chamber of Commerce. So it's an affinity group at the Chamber of Commerce, and we've been working with them for 3 years. And we've given out over $85,000 worth of small grants. It's been a tremendously successful program. And so out of our thinking of the work that we're doing with that particular organization came the idea that we could expand that effort to include the city and the county economic development departments, and maybe restructure that grant to be sort of mid-size minority-owned businesses that perhaps we're looking to scale by being able to hire more employees with a goal of being able to provide more resources back to the tax bases here in our community. So as it stands now, there's a proposal to consider a $50,000 commitment from both the county, the city of Charlottesville, and the United Way, where we'd offer up to $10,000 grants for Black-owned small and mid-sized businesses. We ideally would launch that program this year, and we would also want to try the program again next year, so sort of pilot it to see how it would go with this sort of expanded scope. Next slide. So one of the things that we've looked at is with the businesses we've been helping through the Minority Business Alliance, we've been giving grants of up to $5,000. We just did a grant round with over 50 people that applied. And that has worked well. That's really to sustain these small businesses, but we really see this as an opportunity for growth for larger, like I said, mid and larger size businesses. So that will be the particular focus of the proposed partnership with the city and the county. And I'm just going to pause for a minute and see if there's any questions before I go on. Great, next slide. So we wanted to kind of share a little bit about the types of industries that we're seeing in terms of the grant process for the Minority Business Alliance. So we've just finalized and actually gave out some awards at their annual gala. So it was everything from home care for seniors, fashion apparel, mental health counseling, food service, catering, sports medicine, really a wide variety of companies that were interested in this grant. And we've heard from folks that have been able to utilize the resources that it had made a significant impact, even at the $5,000 level for their companies. Next slide. We also just wanted to bring up a little bit about the historical context. I'm sure many of you have heard of Vinegar Hill and the deconstruction of Vinegar Hill and what that meant for minority-owned, Black-owned businesses. A lot of the companies and businesses we talked today actually had relatives that had businesses back at Vinegar Hill in the 1960s. And so, you know, they talk about the challenge that has existed to rebuild companies and to rebuild that wealth. And one of the things United Way is very focused on is sort of understanding what the history was and how we can rebuild economic strength in these minority and Black communities through various granting sources. Next slide. We're also looking at sort of the key poverty indicators that exist in our community. So around housing, we only see 24% of Black families having home ownership relative to 50% white families. Access to capital is one of the biggest challenges a lot of the family space that we serve. So you can see that 12.4% folks applying for a grant were able, where the denial rate, and 4.5% for white applicants. We see the same trend contend in early education and also in health disparities. So this is data that we gathered here in our local community, and again, kind of builds the case for the fact that we need more additional sources of funding for small entrepreneur businesses. Next slide. Another sort of fact we wanted to present is research through Harvard. It's the Opportunity Insights nonprofit, and they find that it's very important for cross-class connections to boost economic mobility. In fact, they found it was one of the most important factors. Albemarle County has higher than average economic connectedness, but upward income mobility is still lagging. So if you are low income, making under $35,000 a year, your ability to get ahead is that much more challenging. But being able to connect to individuals in higher income levels certainly makes a significant difference in growing your organization. So another part of what Envision is really set up to do is to help create those networks and opportunities for people to connect. And so we have several different platforms that we're currently offering to do that, but that would also be a part of what we envision with this partnership, is that once these grantees we're able to get access to the funds, we'd have opportunities for them to meet and network in addition to the Minority Business Alliance offerings. Next slide. And just wanted to talk a little bit about like goal 3, which is connected community. We do a community table, so we bring individuals together from different economic backgrounds, different racial backgrounds, and provide an opportunity for dialogue and conversation. We found that to be extremely helpful in growing some of that social connectedness. We also do a weekly Envision radio program where we have Black community leaders come on and talk about everything from education, business, and health, and essentially build sort of a different type of narrative about the types of individuals that are leading in our community. And we've also done some fun projects like a Color Seaville project that talks about different significant spaces in our community, sharing some of the complex history that has kind of, you know, marked the Charlottesville community. So these are different opportunities we've created to create some of this connection and understanding about our culture and our history here in Charlottesville. Next slide. So we just wanted to end with, we're actually going to be doing a big collaboration and a mural on the downtown mall with the Friends of Seville. And this will actually be something we're launching on Saturday. We're excited about it. The Minority Business Alliance grantees, past recipients will be attending, and as well as Envision Radio guests. And again, it's an opportunity to really promote entrepreneurism and certainly Black business owners. And we'll have the Harmony Wines winemaker, who's a Black wine vintner, will be there to serve his wine. So again, another opportunity to network and create some social opportunity here in the community. And last slide. So that's all I wanted to share, just basically an opportunity to create some new economic revenue for minority-owned businesses, and an opportunity to create access to capital here in our community. Any questions?
Bobby, could you speak to that you've already, could you tell us how the EDA and the city of Charlottesville reacted to your presentation? I guess you made about a month or so ago.
Yeah, absolutely. So we did a similar presentation and got very strong support of the concept. It's been a program that the city of Charlottesville has been looking to develop and to grow. They've been looking for partners. They do a lot of work in the month of September with promoting the Black Business Expo, which is, I think, in its 4th year. They actually sold out a booth this year, from what I understand. They have a wait list. So they've been doing work in this category, but they haven't had a program quite like this, where there's a significant commitment in terms of resources and in partnership with other organizations. So the way it stands now, they're, I think, excited to get going on this project and hoping that the county feels the same.
Good afternoon. This is Diane from McKeel. I'm the Board of Supervisors liaison to the EDA. It's great to see you this afternoon. I have a couple of questions. What is the breakdown with Alamo and Charlottesville with the applications and the awards between the two localities? I'm just curious. The numbers.
Right, that's a good question. I don't know, I can get that to you, Diane, if I have the breakdown of how many people with the Minority Business Alliance came from the city versus the county, but I can certainly get that information as a follow-up and send you an email tomorrow.
Yeah, I'd really like to see that information, please.
Yeah.
The second question I have is, I'm sorry, it's another. Second question I have is, do you all locally, when you're establishing your data, do you use the United Way ALICE data at all in your decision-making processes?
So we are a member of the Virginia Alice project with the other United Ways, and the data has gotten much better over the past 3 or 4 years, but it's still not necessarily being gathered at the community level. And so we'll use it as a general reference point, but we're doing our own data collection through the Financial Resiliency Task Force that I mentioned in terms of collecting data from the families that we'll be serving. So the answer is yes and no. We use it as sort of a broad guide, but we still do our own data collection at the community level.
And that makes sense. I know Hampton Roads is using it for some of their outreach into the community. They're using ALICE data. And for Alamo County, not so much for the city, but for Alamo County with 726 square miles and 6 magisterial districts, the ALICE data, unlike census data, lets us get into the magisterial specific, which is really critical. And we can just leave it at that. But I'm very interested in what you all are, how you're using it, what it's like. At another time, not that. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. We actually, I think, are reaching out to set up a meeting with you so we can get into the details of the data.
Like, it just for folks that might not know, ALICE is, and I'm trying to remember now,
Asset limited income constraint.
income constrained employee. I think I have that right.
You got it right. Essentially, for working poor, for families that are just basically making ends meet, sort of that diagram I showed at the beginning of the presentation, where the majority of their sources are going to income, transportation, childcare, things of that nature.
And I'm interested in it selfishly because it impacts my specific chapter district. So just right. It's very.
No, that's
A lot of stories. Tell the story. Thank you.
yes. Other questions?
Well, Hi, this is David Shreve, Director on the BDA. Did you, the key phrase here in your presentation, I think, is access to capital.
Yes.
Did you consider a slight twist to this program by which the money would be used instead of really tiny grants, but instead for subsidizing loans, so that they will come close to zero cost, interest wise?
Yeah, so we work with Stephen, the director at the CIC, and he provides very low interest loans, and he does that well. So we were trying to come up with sort of a complementary product. One of the things that he has expressed to us over the time that he and I've worked together is that a lot of his folks that go through his program, the 16-week entrepreneur program, they're not in a position to be sort of banked in a traditional way. They maybe don't have the credit or they don't have the income to suitably repay a loan product. And so we saw this as an opportunity to be sort of that scaffolding effect of providing a grant to a family to help get them ahead in terms of building credit, building the ability of their company, essentially to increase their income, and then put them in a position to apply for a grant to expand their company, or a loan rather.
Yeah. So I guess it's like a chicken and egg kind of a thing in some ways. You mentioned that you got some feedback where even grants as small as 5,000, as you said, made us some difference. Could you give us some specific examples of that? Or maybe
Yeah.
just one?
So one of the first grants we did was to the tax ladies. It's a local women-owned tax accounting firm, Black-owned, and she bought a new server. And the report that we've gotten from her is that it was significant. It really changed her ability to be able to provide accounting services. The old server was crashing and they were having a lot of challenges around that. So that was one of the first examples. The other one was Vu Noodles, which was a small restaurant that was in the Jefferson School, and the grant allowed them to move over to Water Street, to the small space that they now have, and expand their business significantly by the purchase of equipment and things she needed for the kitchen. So those are just two examples.
So in a sense, the $5,000 or the $10,000 grant is generally earmarked for capital acquisitions.
It has been, and that's something, you know, we'll continue to think about in terms of formulating what we want specifically the grants to go do through this partnership. But capital improvements have certainly been one of the big ticket items that people need support on. So, you know, whether it's equipment or computer hardware, point of sale software, tools, things of that nature.
Thanks.
Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chair, if I may. It was embedded in what Mr. Scooter said, but generally the concept is this will be a 2-year pilot. We would measure the efficacy of it and then determine if it's achieving the outcomes that the community so desired before we continue on. So what in essence we would be asking for from this particular authority is just a general, yeah, we're supportive of this. We'll go finish building out the program. We didn't want to get in front of anyone, but if so, we'll finish out the program, sort of a 2-year pilot, if you will, and we would want to come back and obviously report the results, not only for accountability, but see if it's making a difference if we hope it will.
Would you like a motion supporting that position?
I think it would be appropriate, not a resolution, but just, you know, general support so that we can go iron out all the details with the city, go through their EDA, just come back here and then announce the program once it's fully forward.
Okay. Any authority members have a thoughts to that? I think we can take a straw vote with the city. I fully support what you guys are doing for one.
For two.
Yes.
For three, for four. Yeah, I think it's a great idea, and I issued the questions I did because my only concern was that you make the dollar really count. You know, when you offer it to these fledgling businesses, and it might be worth doing some, a little more analysis to see. Generally, in a community where there's lack of access to capital, because they consider they have a zero chance for that access, they don't think hard enough about what they would do if they had access. And so some of the grant money, you know, if it's seen as a windfall and they're smart enough, they'll make the right acquisition or purchase, but if not, so maybe a little guidance program would be useful in that regard. That's good idea.
Yeah, I'll just jump in and say, we've gotten some pretty specific sort of authorized use of grant funds that we've developed, sort of based on best practices from what we've done with the Minority Business Alliance. So, so we have identified that, and, you know, our staff actually ends up working with these grant recipients to make sure that when they are using the funds and have all of the tools they need to use those funds appropriately. So there is some built-in staff time to being able to work with individuals once they've received the funds to ensure that the purpose of the funds is being used in the way in which they described in the grant.
It might also be useful as the program gets a track record and we get into this in a couple of years, sharing the success stories with potential recipients so that they know, you know, the real potential here and what is useful and what is not useful or less useful perhaps.
Yeah, that's definitely part of what we plan to do. We've just made the grant allocations to the Minority Business Alliance businesses just about 3 weeks ago. So we'll, you know, have more information from those. But the last round of 70,000 was to help businesses that were impacted by COVID. And as far as I understand it, all of those businesses were able to use the resources to help pivot, and all of them are still in business and doing well. So I think it was, you know, $10,000, but it was a significant impact for them.
Thank you, ma'am. Anybody else have?
Well, just Don's on, I don't know if that's just here. Director Long. Or Director Long, I don't know if you had a chance to comment. I was just saying this, figure out how to do.
Hey, I think you were asking me if I had any thoughts. I know it'll come as a shock to you, but I'm on the United Way board, and so I probably shouldn't vote on this. So, but I think you could probably take my position from that conflict.
Okay. Thank you so much for the presentation. Look forward to monitoring this as we go down the road.
Yep, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is land use capacity analysis.
Okay, yep, I will.
I'll go ahead and introduce the topic while he pulls up our guest speaker. So as you may recall, the Albemarle County Eastern 44 Comprehensive Plan Review is going through this process. One of the biggest proponents of the land use capacity analysis was the understanding about jobs produced. So as part of the hiring of Tim Horn to do some objective analysis of our community, we added additional scope of work to that particular contract that came Horn to look at the detailed specifics associated with job producing land. Our guest speaker today is prepared to tell you a little bit about those findings. There is no specific action other than we want your feedback that what you think is the appropriate response from the county on this particular item, and it will later be shared with the planning commission and the board. And then economic development will be in phase 2 of the planning process. So we'll have the opportunity to sit down and provide direct input into the comprehensive plan itself. So your comments today will also be entered into that process through the other staff. With that being said, you want to introduce our guest speaker, Nathan?
Oh, sure. Jessica Rossi is our consultant with Kimley Horn, who's been leading this project with community development and economic development. She's going to share her screen and go through some presentation slides, and is ready to answer any questions the EDA has. So take it away, Jessica.
Good afternoon, everybody. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to confirm. It's nice to be with you today. Roger, thanks for the tee up for this discussion today. We've been working on this for a good bit now, and just to give you a little bit of a background on this effort to do a land capacity analysis is part of a stated policy objective through the current comprehensive plan, which is the 2015 plan. And that is to think about land development in the development areas from an efficient standpoint to prevent the premature expansion of the development areas. And part of the strategies of that objective is to maintain an updated capacity analysis, to do it about every 2 years, to make sure that according to the comprehensive plan, residential land exists to meet new housing needs. I think one thing that's really interesting that we did this time around in support of the AC 44 growth management policy update is that we really looked at this from a different perspective. We not only maintained the residential piece that we have done in previous years, but we also looked at this from an economic development lens. So we really focused in much more intently than we have in the past on non-residential development, what the capacity is, and then ultimately what the short-term development opportunities are from that perspective. So that's kind of the change year over year that we have made. And I think we have some really interesting results. I hope you all find that. Let's see here. How do I do this? There we go. So just really quickly, I know you're all probably very well aware, but this land capacity analysis focused in on the development areas of the county. And so the development areas are shown in this map in kind of that yellowish color, ranging from neighborhood 1 and 2, which are highly urban, just north of the city of Charlottesville, all the way up to Piney Mountain, which is the furthest north, over to Crozet, which is the furthest west. Neighborhoods 4 and 5 are south of the city of Charlottesville, and then neighborhoods 3, 4, and the village Rivanna are all to the east of the city. So from a methodology standpoint, this really used a multi-step process to estimate what the land use build out is for those development areas. We started with a development opportunity analysis, which was the first step. And what we did as part of this analysis is compared the current value of land to any existing improvements. So that could include built structures or even parking lots, any money that's been spent to improve the land. Parcels that were deemed to have development opportunity were really those properties that could receive and support future development in relatively short term. The next step was to take those parcels and refine them based on a property's primary land use. We also took into consideration in this refinement step lot sizes, so which properties are actually of the size and scale to support development, ownership, so if it's publicly owned, if it's a park, if it's a cemetery, we wanted to understand those, and so we were able to take those off the table. We took into consideration environmental constraints, among a series of other factors. The next step, step number 3, was to identify a known development pipeline. And this was done a little bit differently this year. So as I noted before, we previously had focused in primarily on the residential component of build out. And so we had very, very detailed development pipelines for housing developments. And that would include anything under construction, anything that's approved, and anything that's under review. What we did this year is we also incorporated non-residential development pipelines. But one caveat with that is that with residential, we had very detailed pipeline information. With commercial, we were less able to distinguish between the types of non-residentials, whether it's retail or office or industrial, the entitlement process today does not afford us the ability to be able to differentiate. So we had to use the two pipelines just slightly different in the analysis. And finally, our step 4 was to develop a theoretical maximum build out. And the way that we did this is we took those opportunity parcels and we built them out based on a standard set of development assumptions. And these assumptions included a mixture of uses, considerations for environmental constraints, reduction in developable acreage based on infrastructure improvements, and then reduction based on open space standards. And so that ultimately brought us to the land use build out analysis that I'll present the results for you here shortly. So I mentioned the non-residential pipeline. Again, these are in various stages of review, whether it's a rezoning, a site plan, a building permit, but these are not where our focus was on non-residential development that is not yet built. And so what we were able to do is estimate this across each of the separate development areas, which resulted in this remaining approved unbuilt square footage. So you can see that there's a real variation between the development areas and the development pipeline for non-residential space. It ranges from just under 30,000 square feet in neighborhood 7 to just over 5 million square feet in Holliesmead. There is an estimated 8.1 million square feet of non-residential space approved and unbuilt in the pipeline, and an additional 668,000 square feet that are currently under review. About 62% of the remaining approved and unbuilt non-residential space is in Hollymead, and that includes North Fork, which is the UVA Discovery Park. In fact, North Fork is the largest non-residential site in the approved pipeline currently, with more than 3 million square feet remaining to be built. The other component that we prepared as part of this process that was a little different than what we've done previously is we did some high-level market demand forecasting. We wanted to understand the number of residential units, the amount of retail, office, industrial space, and the number of hotel rooms that we might be able to expect to be built from a demand perspective in the county over the next 20 years. These are estimates, of course. They consider future population growth in the county and how those new residents will drive demand for different residential and non-residential product types. It acknowledged the historic pace of growth, and we focused more intently on the last 10 years. And one thing that's really important to note with these demand forecasts is that they are not initially constrained, and we'll circle back to that idea here shortly. We didn't really take into consideration in the demand forecast the availability of land, the cost of development, access to infrastructure, or environmental regulations. So from a non-residential theoretical maximum build out, where we ended up in the development areas was that there was capacity for about 1.9 million square feet of retail, 2.7 million square feet of office, 5.5 million square feet of industrial, and over 2,500 hotel rooms. So this is the true build out of the development areas. And we found that for all non-residential categories, the theoretical maximum build out generally exceeded the 20-year market demand forecast. We provided non-residential build out by development area. And so you can see that there is a lot of variation here, just like the pipeline. There are development areas that have very little. In fact, the village of Rivanna has almost no future build out for non-residential. And again, this is based on future land use classifications. Some neighborhoods 6 and 7, have very low but have some, and then some neighborhoods have, a considerably more than others. Another way to look at it is, spatially via map. So we were able to parcel by parcel build out the development areas. And these dots on the map kind of help to tell a story of the size and scale for retail, office, and industrial square footage from a build out perspective. Again, theoretical maximum build out perspective in the future. However, like I had mentioned previously, both the market demand forecast and the build out really needed to take into consideration some additional constraining factors for build out. It is, as designed and as duplicated from previous efforts, it really is a maximum theoretical effort. And so we wanted to bring a little bit of a reality check to the process. Some of the factors that are up on the screen are things that we took into consideration, and they may be accounted a little bit in terms of the build out methodology, some things like reductions for infrastructure or some environmental constraints. However, other factors were more challenging to build into the actual model. So we brought in some additional analysis on the backside. So what you'll see up here, these are constraining factors that both influence the residential and the non-residential build out as we move forward. So for non-residential, there was a lot of ways that we were able to kind of look at this under a different lens. We prepared a secondary analysis in partnership with Roger and JT to really think strategically about the amount of land that's truly available for short-term development for non-residential uses. Our build-out analysis resulted in just over 1,600 buildable acres that were identified as remaining in the development areas. What we did is we took those remaining acreage for buildable opportunities, and we took them through a process to identify tiers to provide just a little bit of additional context from a feasibility standpoint. The tiers represent a different level of readiness for site development, and they also are really handy in communicating risk and uncertainty. And so as you can see from the screen, tier 5 are going to be those sites that are ready to go. They have permits in place. They are, shovel or pad ready. There's 90% success that, development is going to happen on these sites, in a relatively short time frame. Tier 1, on the other hand, maybe designated from a future land use perspective for development, but they're not zoned that way. The seller might be willing or not. There may be minimal to no infrastructure. There's probably no due diligence performed. And these sites will probably be more ready to come to market in a period of 3 to 7 years. When we look at the secondary analysis, we took the development area parcels. We had already scaled them through to identify those that were buildable from a receiving standpoint for future growth. We went through another exercise to refilter the properties to understand which ones are at least 3 acres in size. We wanted to further identify those parcels that are currently vacant, didn't have any additional buildings or value on them. And we wanted to find properties that were appropriately zoned to receive the growth, not just a future land use designation, but has a clear zoning designation attached. Of the 22,900 total parcels in the development areas, we found a total of 39 properties that total about 890 acres in the development areas that were deemed buildable through the analysis and were tier qualified. So made it to at least tier 1 in in the flow chart on the previous slide. We went through with the economic development staff, parcel by parcel, reviewing those 39 properties. And we found just one property that met the description of tier 4. We found no tier 5 properties. So that very top, ready to go to market today, we were unable to identify any parcels that really met that. Tier 4 still could go to market between 12 to 18 months. So when we think about the future for economic development opportunity and non-residential development, the goal for your community should be to create a successful portfolio of sites. And these sites should vary in a lot of different attributes to kind of meet a lot of different priorities. Sites should be ready and available in each of the county's development areas. We want a portfolio with sites that range in size that can attract a wider variety of end users. We want sites that range in price points, sites that have existing infrastructure, which could include power, water, sewer, roads, broadband, and then sites with a variety of locational attributes, whether that's proximity to UVA, proximity to the airport, accessibility to major highway corridors, or accessibility to rail. From a conclusion standpoint, we found that there's a lot of information that we prepared as part of this analysis, and I've really just given you the most high level highlights that I was able to squeeze into about 10 minutes of time. And some of the conclusions that we found from this analysis is that, although the land use build out for non-residential uses suggests that there's sufficient capacity to meet future demand, there are a lot of constraining factors that result in less than maximum build out and negatively impact the amount of developable land, particularly for non-residential uses. I think this is particularly important when you think about it in the lens of short term. The tier analysis found only 39 parcels that can support significant non-residential development in the short term and that would be attractive to job creating land uses. We suggest additional coordination with the county's economic development office and the EDA that would allow for identification and preparation of critical properties to support future job creation. And, through this process, aligning efforts of the land capacity analysis with the goals of Project Enable's ability to strengthen existing businesses and accommodate a diverse inventory of new businesses will kind of bring both Project Enable's goals and priorities together with AC 44s and the growth management plan. And so that was a really quick review of kind of everything that we have been working on for a while, and be more than happy to answer any questions you all might have.
Any directors have questions? Mr. Drew?
Thanks very much. I have one question about the various parcels that you examined that could meet the tier 1 threshold of those areas. Were you able to identify a constraint that was the most dominant or the most obvious constraint out of all the various constraints that you listed?
That's a good question. I might also ask Roger to weigh in on what his thoughts are. My sense is when we were really diving down into, finding properties that were at least 3 acres. So that was certainly a constraint there. And then finding those properties that had access to, highway infrastructure, we kind of targeted properties that were, in the development areas with appropriate infrastructure, and because we would want them to be brought to market relatively quickly, and adding on top of that they were appropriately zoned, not just a future land use designation, but to have the correct zoning. I think that kind of those, size, zoning, and location were the biggest ones.
You also seem to indicate that the one constraint, which you called site constraints, might have been the squishiest and the hardest to define. So there's a question, is it lack of contiguity, or is it more environmental constraints, landscape? In other words, is this a problem that can only be solved by bulldozers, or is it something bigger than that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a secret that there are environmental and site constraints that are present in your community, whether that be steep slopes, floodplains, wetlands, protected open space. They're prevalent. The easy to develop sites are, have been developed or in the process of being developed. And so, it's getting trickier and trickier. And when you couple finding sites that aren't constrained from a physical attribute with finding sites that have easy access to infrastructure, I think that becomes more and more challenging.
Thanks.
Mhm.
I don't think that's unusual in this part of Virginia. I know Charles has been dealing with it for a long, long time. Any other directors have any comments?
Mr. Rossi, Matt Wallace here, Scottsville District. Thank you for the report. It was really helpful for me to digest it. I saw some of this back at the planning commission level, but it's helpful to look at it again with fresh eyes. I don't want to embarrass or speak out of turn on the process. I remember we spoke on the phone at the beginning of your work to include the town of Scottsville land use categories. I talked about how the town was zoned and what the theoretical build out was. I won't ask you why that's not here. That's not important, but I want to volunteer what the Scottsville information would be, because I think it's relevant for kind of the perspective of including the town, because it is property that could be improved. And if it were improved, it would meet community economic development needs, and all of the real estate value on that improvement would redound to the town budget and benefit everyone. So whether or not it's like tagged officially as development area, it's an additional square mile. I did some napkin math on kind of the type of land use, and I think we're generally similar to the neighborhood mixed use or the downtown Crozet type of category, how it's divided between residential, retail, office, maybe hotel, a very little bit of industrial space. We have a little bit of a development pipeline, which is not as much as Hollywood, but more than right now. And a little bit of a non-residential pipeline, which again is not as much as Hollywood, but more than Rivana and more than a couple of the other development areas. So there is activity and some movement on it. The development area policy has clearly been very effective in pushing residential and commercial investment into designated development areas where utilities and infrastructure exists. And the town of Scottsville has that, despite its non-official style development area categorization. I'd be happy to volunteer the sums into the total if it's of interest, but the pipeline and build out that our 1 square mile has, if it's theoretically added, is 6% of the total, which is proportionate to our ratio within the development area that were included and relevant to these kinds of calculations. We have some new retail and office coming online and some acreage that could be improved, which meets those readiness criteria of flat land, zoned commercial, utilities in place. It's on the market and available in much the same way as other zones have. I see the map of non-residential results, and a couple of the development areas are looking awfully sparse in a way that the town of Scottsville is not. So I think we are participating in a way that's helpful. And coming down to that bottom line with the filter and the concerning very small number of 39 development area parcels, I can add +2 in town, which, as small as we are, feels like a significant contribution, taking that number from 39 to 41. So I'm really impressed with your methodology, and I think that the town, for what it's worth, at the far southern end has something new to add. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board? I appreciate that presentation and I think it's very thorough. And I look forward to your final analysis. I think this is the kind of critical forward thinking that any progressive county in the state of Virginia really needs to go through. And I'm pretty excited about having some of this data available. I think most of us know that vacant developable land is very scarce in Albemarle County. This verifies that, and I think once we have an idea of what we don't have, we can think more about the business of getting something that we do need. Any other comments? Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, next item on the agenda is APIS grant part of the craft cider expansion.
Yeah, I'm going to introduce our distinguished guest. We have Tim Edmond with us today. He's the co-founder of Vbrsp. For those of you who are new to the board, I'll provide a little historical context. Tim and his co-founder came to the county some 3 years ago to go through an agricultural, forestry, and industrial development grant. Yes, maybe you didn't go that long. And that process was immensely successful and resulted in the redevelopment of a property down on 29 South. The good news is it was extremely successful. The challenge with that came, Tim and his team were so successful, they're going, how we're going to keep up the production and what we're going to do to move forward in this community. So, Tim, doing his due diligence, had opportunities to locate their production all around this part of Virginia, also outside of Albemarle County. So we have been working in concert to find a home for Tim and his need for, and his co-founder need for additional production. And through a series of working together, we've located a spot down on Broadway quarter. Part of helping Tim and his cohorts locate here included providing some financial incentive to stay in the county. As you may be aware, it's a lot less expensive sometimes if you really move further out away from Midtown and outside of town. So Vbrsp decided they wanted to be part of our community. We wanted to stay here, and we tried to find a way to help them do that. It led to what you all knew as Project Home at the time, which I guess is a foreign word for Apple. What language is that? Is that
Italian?
I forgot the genesis, but we take great pride in naming things. But nonetheless, we got a place for them to work down on Broadway quarter, which is we were part of the Broadway study. That's what we really would like to see that future look like. A place for both people, places, and jobs that all folks would like to be there. And so Tim and his team has decided to locate down there with the production there. Hope I get this right. It's $9,000 investment. It's 8 new jobs. It's really tripling production of 1.5 million pounds of additional apples being purchased from Virginia. It also includes some county goals of sort of activating Broadway. So they plan to get a certificate of occupancy there and eventually go to the case run. And all those things will be part of a performance agreement, which if they meet those criteria, they will be eligible for $50,000 from the VDAX grant, is getting a match to the county of this particular area, which would be a pass through from the county to you all. That being said, Tim's here to say a few words and then answer any questions you might have about.
Hey, Tim, can we welcome you up to this seat right
Sure.
here?
Yes.
This is our designated presenter seat.
Great. This is our first time.
Don and whoever else was on the ceiling.
Yeah.
Great. First of all, thank you guys for having me and for doing the work you all do. I've seen firsthand the work of this body and I'm immensely grateful at how organized you all are and the type of work you've done that I've seen firsthand, having been through this process, as Roger mentioned in 2019, for the last leg of a major growth and development step for Potters. For the board members who haven't met yet, I'm Tim. founded Potters 11 years ago with my partner Dan in Albemarle County on a horse farm in Free Union, where we both bought houses out in that area of the county and have existed for the past 11 years. Recently, we ran out of space in the facility we were in. Couldn't keep going. Just guys are spending 2-3 hours a day, just kind of like playing Tetris, forklift, moving things around, and eventually push came to shove, we had to go. And really, a couple key things happened. One, tasting room was really successful. Grants were very helpful, both the EDA and the county and the state providing COVID relief assistance, made some really key changes at our retail establishment to get through the pandemic. JT, if you want to, I'm going to kind of jump around, but
I'll follow you if you yeah.
Go here. So just by way of quick introduction, the building on the left there is our tasting room, renovated stone church. That was our last APID grant. Beautiful facility, was a labor of love. On the right was the pandemic kind of adaptation. We were hosting live music outside in squares. Thank goodness that chapter has started to come to a close. But it's enabled us to really build a brand. It's amazing how much of a marketing arm the tasting room has become for us in terms of facilitating some regional growth opportunities. The pandemic, in addition to really forcing us to become creative in terms of how to continue doing retail, also really focused on how we're going to do wholesale. And a big part of that is production. And so that really brought us to where are we going to go, where we're going to move our operation. Really wanted to stay in Albemarle County, but as you all know, industrial space severely limited. Really not a lot of options. There was exactly one property on the market that would have fit our needs here. There are a few more in Waynesboro, and we were kind of at the point where we needed to make moves. So in concert with Roger and JT and some others, we were able to locate a facility in the Broadway corridor, which met our needs, both for production expansion as well as a potential retail outpost downtown to complete that Broadway corridor. As I'm sure you all know, a lot of cool stuff going on over there, starting to connect down to the woolen mills, from the site for brewing, potentially a couple more brewing operations in that area. Just a lot of potential pedestrian activity in the future connecting that corridor. So for us, leg one, let's find somewhere to locate production. And then leg two, how does this continue to fit our needs of really building another foothold in the community. For us, a big part of what we're doing, why we love Albemarle County, are the people. We've been really fortunate to attract a team where we're able to build careers instead of jobs. Our average retention at our company is about 6.5 years. We've only been in business for 10 years. So we're doing great. We've got a really high quality team where we're offering benefits. We're paying way above market, but we're attracting really high quality people. And we're giving them creative agency to be part of the team where they can really add and showcase what they're doing. Community is a big part of what we're doing, as I mentioned, and having a retail foothold on that Broadway corridor, very attractive to us. But thing number one is really production. So for us, launching 2 new product lines. For those of you who are unfamiliar with our cider, our company, those top 3 boxes are really our flagships. Cans are a pretty new addition. We're getting pretty great grocery uptake. That was really the silver lining of COVID, was we really had to start focusing on grocery. Those 3 products in the top left have really penetrated Whole Foods, Kroger, Harris Teeter, some major grocers regionally. And as part of this project, we'll be looking to expand to Georgia and Florida. And I've in fact just completed distribution agreements with both states for full state distribution with the largest beer distributor in Georgia and partial state distribution with the second largest distributor in Florida. So very pleased that that leg of the puzzle is coming through for us. It's obviously we want to build a production machine that can facilitate growth, but the other side is, is there a market? And there is, thankfully. So in addition to that, we're going to launch a few new products coming out this fall, the mixed pack, the new hop cider, a lot of growth on the horizon for us. I'll keep my presentation relatively brief and allow you all to ask the questions if anybody has some.
Any questions from the audience?
Very impressive, thank you.
Congratulations. What's your view of, as an insider of the national marketplace? Cider, of course, is a historic product here in this part of the world, and it isn't elsewhere. But are we in an age now where that doesn't matter anymore, where it's all just kind of, whoever does the best marketing, it's, I mean, I'm just amazed the way seltzer products, took off. I wouldn't have guessed, but they're everywhere now.
So
Are you seeing that with cider too?
we're in an age of differentiation, and what happened is there's proliferation in most categories of, like, if you're a brewer today and you make an IPA, it's like, guess what? Like, how are you going to differentiate? And that's where regionalism and local has really started to become, it's become a more regional, a more local endeavor than a regional one. So whereas there used to be large regional craft breweries, it's a lot harder to do that today. The best thing one can do in the industry is to specialize and to come up with something that nobody else does. And so for us, if you look at a cider market, every cider on the market is loaded with sugar, tons of residual sugar. At Potter's, we just decided, we kind of swam in the opposite direction. And we said, none of our ciders will have any sugar, 0 grams across the board. And that eliminated the fat part of the market for us. But by sticking to a differentiated strategy, along comes seltzer, and people are trying to be conscious about what they put in their body as it relates to sugar and carbs and alcohol. And all of a sudden there's a marketplace for us. We stayed consistent there, and we're kind of in this, there's like the Red Sea where all the fish are and all the chum is, where all the competition is. And we're off in this like sparse blue sea swimming around, where there's not a lot of competition. We can specialize. And that's really the active piece of adapting a marketplace is specializing. So it's kind of, we're kind of agnostic. The market has swelled and then collapsed. The sweet macro cider market has shrunk as seltzer came on, and we've really been insulated from that.
I want to congratulate you on your taste of musicians.
Yeah.
My daughter's longtime boyfriend plays.
It's interesting, you anticipated my question. I did 1.4 miles. Oh, sorry. Yeah, so the question was just quality life with the neighbors closer. Do you have any issues with the line? Because there's some homes that are pretty close to that facility. Yeah.
Wait, the new facility or the 2019 church facility?
The church facility.
Yeah, so, working with the neighbors is obviously a key part of keeping things together. So within the first 2 months of being there, I went around personally and gave everybody my cell phone number and said, hey, if you got an issue, let's talk and let's work it out. And we have had a few noise complaints. One neighbor who is on like the same topography as we are, and it's weird that like no one else can hear because there's one neighbor who's on the exact same topographic line. And so save her, we're great, 2 thumbs up all the way around. And then she unfortunately can't hear, it's not very disruptive. So I've been working with her directly on, all right, what if I turn the speaker just like this, can you hear it? And it's really like, it's a community.
Plants and apple trees and the.
Yeah, it's figuring out creative ways, the solution, can we set the band up somewhere else? And trying to work it out. But I would say it's going really well. It's not 100% perfect, but we're definitely adaptive, and we're, I think for the most part, people just want to be heard and you just kind of have to show up and listen.
Any other questions or comments? We have a resolution in front of us for the matching grant for the governor's safety grant and performance agreement with Authorized Craft LLC. Mr. Johnson, you want to explain to us what this is about?
Yes, sir. We're working directly with the state to determine the legal instrument that's best suited for this. But the terms of the agreement are this: if, from the state's perspective, if Otter's Craft that's $900,000, creates 8 new jobs, and uses 1.5 million additional pounds of Virginia grown apples, they will have satisfied the agreement with the state. For the county, we are not providing monies in advance like we once did. We had, as you may be aware, we had issues with fallbacks, getting information and so forth. So we have changed our performance agreement structure to make them performance-based. The 2 thresholds of payment from the county's perspective will be once he gets a certificate of occupancy to operate on the facility on Broadway to receive the first payment. Once they open up the sort of tasting retail space that he mentioned will be in the future, will be eligible for the second payment. All of those in combination of the requirements for Otter's Craft to receive $100,000.
I think it's a great program. Thank you for that explanation. We have a resolution before us. Has everybody had an opportunity to read? Okay. I'll entertain a motion for approval.
Mr. Chair, move to approve the resolution.
Okay, second.
I'll second.
Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Been moved and seconded. We'll do a roll call.
Director Long, can you hear me?
Aye.
Director Ray,
Aye.
Director Shree,
Aye.
Director McCullough. Aye. Director Law.
Yep.
And Director Moore. Aye. The motion passes.
Thank you very much, everybody. The next agenda item is resolution providing grant to the town of Scottsville hotel feasibility study. Mr. Johnson, would you like to introduce that?
I'd love to introduce that. In fact, I'll introduce with really breaking news. We just, Ms. Casey decided she was going to be here and physically here, and she's stuck in traffic along the way. So if it will be all okay by you, Mr. Chair, we'll go ahead and go to the, move back to the staff report and present some information to you while we're waiting for the, she doesn't come on board, he's just sticking until 16. That's who she, we're waiting for them to arrive, and so we'll come back and we'll cover the staff.
Yes. Okay, well, directors, we have 2 things on the staff report we wanted to share and make the authority aware of. We are submitting a Virginia Business Ready Sites Program grant application to the state with the University of Virginia Foundation. This is within their North Fork UVA Discovery Park, which is a site that Jessica mentioned in her land use capacity analysis. That one tier 4 site that's available in the county is this 253 acres of the park. This is just to orient you briefly here. This is Route 29, and this would be Airport Road. And so the park has set aside this northern portion of the site specifically for economic development. It does not currently have any buildings on it, but we are focusing the application on the largest pad within that area, lot B5. That's about 31.5 acres. We've asked for a sort of a broken down ask the state's budget for this year for the VBRSP program is about $85 million. Last year, the program was $7 million. So this is a huge jump. That said, it's open to the whole state and a lot of people are very interested. So the state received a total of 38 applications, totaling $312 million in total asks. So it's very competitive, but we've narrowed and refined our application from last year, and we're preparing for a virtual site visit. The state is working with a consulting team from KPMG that's done a lot of site selection across the Southeast. And so we'll be, Roger, myself, other key folks from the University Foundation will be meeting with that team in late October. And if we make the cut, they'll come and do an in-person site visit. And if we make the cut from there, we'll hopefully be talking about a stage of work, a series of work that will occur on Lot B5 to prepare it for a business to locate there. So it's tier 4 right now. The scope of our ask is another $6.4 million. That's what it would take to get it to a tier 5. And so I can pause here and see if there are any questions. It would, did you want to, it would buy clearing and grading of a pad, as well as associated infrastructure, an access road, some conduit for certain utilities, water line stub. And they're currently on Lewis and Clark Drive, so they're adjacent, but they're not to a pad on the site. And so from the state's perspective, the marketability of a tier 5 site is we have a prospect, we can bring them to the site, they can look at it and see this is exactly where we're going to go and how our particular operations could be laid out. The University of Virginia Foundation. So one of the differences between last year's application and this year is an agreement to sell in a way that the foundation has had some reluctance to do in the past. So there historically has needed to be a strong connection to the university to be to locate at the park. The foundation is beginning to examine that. They're redoing their strategic plan. And so this application includes, for instance, like a price per acre in a traditional sales. Or
Is the concept imagery that's shown in the upper picture, is that related to the housing discussion that was on that?
This is their master plan. And so I don't, I'm not sure if it reflects exactly what they're doing, what they're proposing with their current application. But yeah, the neighborhood model district is 175 acres at the southern portion of the site. They call that their gateway district.
If I could add a couple of other bits of information, I think this already find interesting. This didn't happen without some support of your chair, Don Wall. Both Don and Deputy found my boss, whatever his name is. And then it came like Doug Walker and myself regularly meet with the foundation. And it required some cultural changes in different ways of thinking. As JT mentioned, prior years, they refused to sell anything. That was part of their plan. And then they also, the community ties portion is important, but not as strong a community connection to the university themselves. They are opening up their thought processes to be better neighbors. The great neighbors now, but even better neighbors, in that they're willing to loosen up some of their thought processes to consider things they would not have historically done as part of the grading goods program, particularly as it relates to community ties. And JT did mention this, but the request in the actual grant application itself is $300,000 an acre. So it's not, it doesn't come without, some hefty price tag located in our community.
The other detail I think that's important for me to mention is that the grant does require a match. And the way that the county and the foundation are matching this $6.4 million request is through the foundation's investment in the extension of Lewis and Clark Drive. So previously Lewis and Clark Drive did not connect. If I can get my mouse up on the screen, it did not always connect down to Airport Road. And so the extension of that road and the associated multi-use path and sewer extension covers the balance of that match. So we're really fortunate to be working with the foundation who's invested heavily in the site to allow us to make this level of request.
What's the timetable on that connection?
It's completed. That connection's been completed. The Lewis and Clark Drive connection, that's been completed. Or you mean across Airport Road?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So my understanding, I believe it's in VDOT's 2025 plans that there'll be a roundabout at Airport Road and Lewis and Clark Drive, and it will make that final connection.
That will connect to the roundabout behind Starbucks at Holiday Town Center. Right.
Yep.
That'll make a big difference.
Yeah.
Hopefully it won't take as long as the one at 151 and 2.
Okay, great.
Any other questions about this before I turn it over to Ashley for the buy local campaign?
One other general comment, JT has been moving this the past month or so, which requires just an enormous amount of work and effort and coordination with the University of Virginia. So thoroughly pleased about both the effort and the result of that particular grant. And so JT mentioned the 6.4 million, but understanding that's a big ask for 1 year's grant. Strategically, the grant application was designed for the state has a la carte choices. Like if you just want to do the pre-development work, it costs a little over $300,000 engineering plan and so forth. If you want to grade, you want to cut down timber, it costs this amount. If you want to do it all, it'll cost this amount. So we feel like we gave them options to find a way to provide us grant funding, and we hope that strategy is doing this right here.
I will very quickly provide an update so that we can get quickly on the deck here. You guys are familiar with the Buy Local campaign, and I provided a little handout that I've been using to do some promotions and little window stickers if you'd like to put this on your vehicle or your home or put it on someone's vehicle and to promote the campaign. We're in our second month now and really trying to get exposure to social media and really drive traffic to the Show Local website. And I would just encourage anyone on their travels or their ins and outs in your districts to show that local love, share this information, and please have people reach out to the website or to me personally, and we'd love to get some collaboration. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you'll have personally after the meeting or by emailing or whatever. Thank you.
All right, well, I'm now pleased to introduce item E. We have with us the distinguished guest, recorded occasions, the executive director of the Charlottesville Albemarle Convention and Visitors Bureau. I will say, Courtney's introduction in our community has resulted in a huge success in a number of ways. Not only if you paid attention to the results of what we call a STAR report, which measures the impact of the tourism industry. The hoteliers in our community have not only rebounded exceptionally well, at least some of that credit should go to the destination marketing organization that's expanding this reach and its strategy to getting folks to come here. There's a lot of money behind the lead. But one of the other things that Courtney has done is she's been sort of the leader, if you will, in many ways, if not the sole leader of the Discover Black Sea. I don't know if you saw recently or not the announcement by the United States Travel Association, but our community under Courtney's tutelage received a national award for that particular campaign. So, you know, we're very fortunate to have someone who has both the strategy, the ability to strategize on what our community needs, but also execute it. Just does a fantastic job in my own opinion. So that being said, I'm gracious that she showed up to really talk to us about Virginia tourism zones, kind of what's happening in Scottsville, and sort of set the stage for the next conversation about hotels. So according to the floor, is yours.
Thanks.
And I'm sorry, Courtney, to interrupt. Unfortunately, we have some unforeseen circumstances where we'll need to end the Zoom call. So the meeting will continue in person with the quorum of EDA directors we have present, but Don, that description will have to just be a teaser. So
They are
the-
not my unforeseen circumstances. They are someone else's unforeseen circumstances.
So to Chair Long and everyone that's participating on Zoom virtually, sorry, we'll have to end this call for another county event, but we welcome you to future in-person Zoom EDA meetings. So thank you for attending, and we will see you next time.